This review is presented by EVDANCE and The Perfect Gloss. Electric cars in all their shape and forms, they flirt with drivers in many good ways. You get that instant flawless acceleration in many of them. You get a very smooth and quiet ride, and owners of them are very satisfied of how fast they can charge and for how far you can travel in them nowadays. So we are rather spoiled with all of that these days. But a very important factor when it comes to cars is how a car makes you feel. Some drivers means that it's everything. Some think that, well, it's not that important. So being creative, offering emotions like putting in sounds in them to really make you feel like you're still in a fossil-driven engine or something that gives some sort of sound, because sure, you can turn it off in so many cars and you can change what type of sound it is, but it still is a sound that is engraved in all of us that comes from the fossil-driven era when we had these traditional engines. We're just so used to that. But then there are some car manufacturers that really keep the essence or the core values of where they really started out. In this case, Porsche. They have always been able to excel when it comes to driving pleasure, no matter what type of car they've created. From the 911 to the 718 Cayman, Porsche Cayenne, Porsche Macan. And the Porsche Macan has always been very popular. A small crossover SUV that I've always liked in some way. I think it looks neat, it just blends in very well. It isn't too big, the steering is there, the brake feel is there. They're comfortable, they're sporty, they feel just good in all its nature. And the fossil-driven Macan has sold more than 800,000 cars worldwide. Now that says a lot about a very popular car from a brand, especially when it's a car that isn't that cheap. This is the new Macan and it's fully electric. Was I a bit skeptical getting into this one? Not really, because we just know that they won't just spit out anything that isn't good. Stepping into the car and everything is rather familiar. It is a bit refreshed without being too futuristic in its design. I just feel at home in here and it just looks very much like a Macan. If you're looking for a high-foaming, well-smelling and effective car shampoo, then you need to check out the Perfect Gloss Omnia Gloss Shampoo. Delivers an outstanding shiny result and makes the surface slippery. Use the code WCWT for a 10% discount. Even though the fossil-driven Macan has a couple of years on it, I still like the quality feel in that car. Everything is very rugged and very sporty, elegant. And I just feel that they've kept about the same design language in some way. Sure, it is refurbished, it is a little refreshed, but the senses you get when you touch everything is here feels the same. Steering wheel, as usual, is very good. Same buttons, same little knob here to turn the different modes from off-road to normal, sport, and Sport Plus, and then that sound, the E sound, starts as well. The car lowers on this adaptive air suspension, and of course it raises as you get into normal or off-road. I like the cluster in front of me, gives me crystal clear information, a little curved. You can get the information from a G meter to what type of tire pressure you got a speedometer, then you can go into the middle. You see how the power is generated when you throttle, how the regen works. That regen isn't the strongest. You can turn it off and on here. Well, there is a regen and that is just fair enough. And then you can get some of your board computer settings on the right here. Radio, sport chrono, and a lot of other settings. So it feels very similar in the settings here, just like in a Taycan. And that's the thing, it reminds me a lot of the Taycan, just in the way and the nature that it is. Turn the car off and on here, no key or anything like that, but you just step into the car and it's on. Then you just push this lever down for drive, up in reverse, and then the parking button there. So everything is very simple in that way. You got carbon fiber inlays, you got some LED ramp, and you can change all the ambience light in here if you want to do that. Very open space down here, which I really like. You got an induction charger here. Put your phone down there. You can close that little lid so you are not disturbed. Something that really makes a car feel qualitative, that is when you start to fiddle about with the vents and when you want to direct them. And it feels very rubberized and very sturdy. A big ramp here with 2 screens, one for you here in the middle and one for your passenger. So you can see some information, you can go into radio, you can get the navigation displayed there. Well, that is not that new. You can see that in many high-end cars, but still a nice treat. And it is a little dimmed, so the driver's attention doesn't get drawn to that side. Some sort of augmented reality in the head-up display, so when the navigation is there you get very good indications shown in the screen. And it's also very cool because when you steer a little, well, that turns with you in your line of vision. Very nice treat, that one. And talking about some shortcuts and not digging into systems, I think they listened a lot to customers because customers really want to turn off speeding warnings, lane assists, and all of this. So they integrate shortcuts nowadays. But here, it's very, very simple. You can designate some shortcut to this diamond. Now I have it in speed warning. So just push that button and the speed warning goes off. And also the lane assist, there is a button here on the cruise control stalk. You just hold that for 2 seconds and it's off. The seats, as usual, are sporty, nice, and rather soft in some way. So perfect mix there. You are just cramped into them whenever you need and whenever you need to go a little quicker. So they are just there supporting you perfectly. 2 big cups that you can put down here. Very deep, so you need to have a very big cup if you ever want to touch it with your hand or your elbow. Well, you can't do that really, so you need to pick it up. I like that. Very nice. Big panoramic roof lets in a lot of light, which is just great in a car like this that is black inside. Would like to have some lighter colors as usual. I think you sit very well in the back seat. Seats are good there as well. It slopes down a bit over the headrest back there, so you can't be too tall because you need to sit in a bit of a leaned forward position. But for me, it works well. So I like the interior in here. It just looks great and is great and feels great. And everything is just top notch. So what do I think about its exterior design? Well, when looking at it from the front, I think it looks very, very hungry. It almost looks like this African bullfrog in some way, but it looks mean, it looks angry. And that strong front splitter, it just looks a bit more muscular. The lights and the Matrix headlights, well, in general, the headlight design just looks spot on to me. I think it looks a bit more progressive. They could have been a bit careful, as they usually are, Porsche, but in these ones, well, they can take a bit more of a design leap, and I think they've really done that. So it feels a little more futuristic, but still, it feels very Macan in some way. I also like when you see it a bit from the side of the front, and when you can sense how it looks in profile. But when you see it in profile, well, I like it all the way to the back. There happens something there that isn't really in my taste, and I think that the old Macan design of that more SUV and not more of a crossover or coupe style sits more well with me in some way, even though I'm not that much for crossovers and SUVs. Straight from the back, it looks rather strong, but it doesn't really cut it for me. I think it looks a bit too caught off, like a dog that is a bit scared, that, you know, folds its back in a bit. It doesn't feel that proud in some way when you look at it from the back. But the LED ramp back there looks, of course, very Porsche, and yeah, it has some good presence about it. It's rather slippery as well, and slippery, well, the rear window back there hasn't got any wiper. It's rather big, it's rather flat, so when it becomes dirty or wet, well, everything will just flush off, of course, when you drive. But yeah, you might need to wipe that off sometimes. But it looks clean, of course. So it's 478 centimeters in length, rather wide, almost 194 centimeters, 162 centimeters high, and the wheelbase is almost 290 centimeters. They also placed the rear electric motor a bit further back for better weight distribution. And this newly developed platform, the PPE, that it shares with the Audi Q6 and the A6 e-tron, well, that makes it a bit more stretched and a bit more flexible when it comes to space. And you can feel that when sitting in the back. I think that the front is rather generous in size. You got 84 liters in that one. Put cables down there and maybe a smaller bag or something. So that's practical. And the boot capacity is 480 liters. You can fold the seats and you got 1,288 liters in total. If you want to load up back there a bit easier, well, then there's buttons back there so the air suspension can lower the car. And that makes it a little easier to load up. On this specific one, we got the rear axle steering. You feel that immediately as you step into a car. It's like, oh, it steers quickly, and also when turning around. So 11 meters when turning with the rear axle steering, that is good. And also, of course, when pushing on a bit more, you can feel that it's a little more agile in its way of moving about. And the Macan Turbo is, of course, the most strong one in the lineup. With 584 horsepower, and then using the overboost and the launch control, well, then you get 640 horsepower and 1,130 newton meters of torque. I mean, that makes up for a very good acceleration. 0 to 100 kilometers an hour. Well, that is done in 3.3 seconds. And that feels when you're driving something that weighs almost 2.5 tons. 0 to 200 kilometers an hour is done in 11.7 seconds. You can run up to a top speed of 260 kilometers an hour. It has a 100 kilowatt hour battery, and the combined range is 518 to 590 kilometers. But what Porsche and Audi is very good at is delivering charge power. 270 kilowatts of charge power, and that, well, that is quick. That is very quick. That means from 10 to 80% of charge is done in 21 minutes. Combined electrical consumption is 20.7 to 18.9 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers. The Macan Turbo starts at 1,310,000 Swedish crowns, and that is about 125,000 euros, depending a little where you live in the world, of course. But we got some extra equipment on this one. As usual, you can add on so much on these cars. And a little strange thing is that they charge you extra for side airbags in the rear. Can discuss that. But some of the extra equipment on this one is the Aventurine Green Metallic. And that will set you back 56,100 Swedish crowns, but it looks very nice. I like this color a lot. It's very discreet, yet it's not boring in any way. 22-inch RS design rims on this one. Big and strong there as well. Fills it up and makes it a bit more present on the road. These cost 39,900 Swedish crowns. Air blades in black, augmented reality head-up display, braking calipers in black, Burmeister high-end surround system, rear axle steering, electrical closing lid for the charge output. That's very nice. Just push it and it just flows aside. I like that one. Something that is very practical as well is that you have 2 charging points on each side at the rear. At one side you can get the maximum effect at a fast charging station, and at the other side it's more for home wall box charging. EVDANCE is your #1 go-to online store for EV chargers. Now you can get the one that suits you best at 20% discount when using the code EVD WhatCar. Check out the links in the video description. The rear side airbags, Sport Chrono package, and a little more. So yeah, that adds up to about 364,000 Swedish crowns extra. But now, how is it to drive really hard? Well, the conditions here in Sweden hasn't been the best now during the winter, so it's a bit slippery here and there. It's been frost, there's been snow, so you can't really push a very heavy thing like this on curvy roads as much as I want to do. But still, you can feel a little of what it's got. And what it's got, well, It's very direct. Here, there is no delay whatsoever. But with all this power, 1100 Newton meters plus, 640 horsepower with its overboost function, it is a bit of a handful actually, when it is a little slippery and a little treacherous and you don't really know where the grip is. Because it has this rear wheel biased feeling and it turns in very quickly. So all that weight, well, transfers very, very quickly. So you need to be just as quick in your steering inputs and gradually just feel how much power you need to put on. And this is the thing, well, you want grip. So when all the systems are turned off, you need to be turned on in a driver-focused way. You can feel immediately that it is a Porsche. It feels just like the Taycan in its tightness, in its response, in its steering input. Everything is just there, and that is the magical thing about Porsche. They will always offer you this. They will always deliver whenever you really want to push it this hard and drive actively. And that is just something that, well, it really spins me up and makes me happy. And there is not that many cars that does such a great thing with their electric cars. Everything is just so well set up in this one. So when in Sport Plus, everything is just sharpened to the teeth. The launch control is, of course, very effective, 0 to 100 kilometers an hour in 3.3 seconds. There it is. And it really optimizes the power so it doesn't spin out in a crazy way. All the wheels, the torque vectoring system, and all of that just does its job perfectly. But if you don't step on the brake and do the launch control and just hit it, well, then you spin off in a wild and crazy way. And of course, it just flies away. The brakes are there. They wouldn't do any mushy brakes, so even that it generates at some point, you don't really feel it. The brakes, they are there at all times. And that is something that you always rely on with Porsche. You know that the brakes, they will always give you the best feedback. And this sound, well, it just raises this E sound as you go quicker. Fun? It's fun. It's nothing too quirky or, you know, a bit ludicrous about it. It gradually just raises its tone the quicker you go, and I like that. Nothing fancy about it. And at the same time, as you drive in sport, this adaptive air suspension, it just works so it doesn't become too stiff in any way. It is very, very subtle. It takes a lot of the dents in the road, sucks them up, and then it just works again. And the PTV, well, that really does its job, but still, when everything is turned off and it becomes a little slippery, you need to be just as lightning fast in your reactions, because the reaction in these electric motors and the throttle response is just blisteringly quick. Now, you can set this car on a track. Sure, it would eat a lot of tires with this weight when braking, steering, and all of that, but you would still be having a lot of fun, and you would still be beating a lot of other different cars. This is still very much Porsche right into its core, and that's the way you want it. So I enjoy this one. It's just as good in the way it is of a SUV crossover as the Taycan is as a sleek, big saloon car. So for being a Porsche, it's still a high technological package with very, very sophisticated systems that is still up there among the very best when it comes to driver sensation. And that's the thing that I brought up in the beginning. How to keep the passion of driving and all these senses that a driver really, really wants. That is something that you will always be rewarded with, and that will always be offered in a Porsche.